All right, chat. It's time for us to talk a little bit about China. So this is this channel called Task and Purpose, which we've been watching once in a while. You know, it's from the perspective of this normie Marine. So don't expect or normie former soldier, not Marine. But I appreciate it because he at least has some experience with the subject matter. And for your average military YouTuber, it's this shut-in from Serbia who got his start talking about international geopolitics on the Country Orb subreddit. You know what I'm talking about. What's that fucking called? The subreddit where it's a bunch of like balls, country ball, Poland ball. There you go. Or by playing EU3. He at least has some level of military experience. So his interpretation of this information will at least be at a, you know, infantryman's level, you know, a grunt's level, which is far superior to your CK3 players' Poland ball videos. All right, let's go. And the question is, did China actually pull off the Taiwan invasion? I was told China won't exist soon and Russia will collapse. The United States of America is far more likely to collapse than either Russia or China because Russia has already collapsed, and what we have now is the result of that. And China has probably the most effective government in the world. So, you know, when I say effective, I mean at implementing policy. So, you know, let's please.
Sound the alarms. China's defense spending has increased by sixfold over the past 2 decades, going from $41 billion in 2000 to $244 billion in 2020, leading to unprecedented levels of military tension with the United States. Sounds like it's time for me to start saber rattling, or at least...
Wait a minute. China's spending more on their military equals they're causing tension with the U.S., but the U.S. increased their spending even more.
Bayonet finagling. With 355 naval ships, 6,000 main battle tanks, and 2 million active...
This motherfucker thinks it's about Australia. Australia sucks in risk. That's the newbie trap. Australia is the newbie trap. What do you do after you have Australia, dude? Say you spend all your time trying to get Australia, except here's the problem. You don't have a reasonable place to expand. You don't have a reasonable place to expand because you're not going to take over all of Asia. Asia's like fucking impossible to get. So you're going to sit there with your couple bonus armies in Australia. Meanwhile, the intelligent player is going to have grabbed South America. And when you have South America, it's very easy to grab North America. So when you have North America and South America, you could easily expand to Europe. You could easily expand to Africa. You could constantly keep people from grabbing bonus armies from Africa or Europe, and you're sitting there just gaining advantage. Meanwhile, the Australia guy is fucked. Newbie trap. All right, let's keep going. Australia and Axis and allies helps with countering Japan, though? Oh, okay. I've won countless games on the highest difficulty of Risk Online by getting Australia, never moving over, just collecting and putting all my guys on one spot, holding it. Eventually, after a couple countries' war, you have such a massive amount on one space, you clean up people on their cards at key times. So you're saying you won games with people that are brain dead and let you turtle. Congratulations. Okay, let's keep going.
Soldiers. China has the world's largest military ever assembled, but this isn't nearly shocking or alarming enough yet. Isn't there somebody out there who'll get me whipped up into a frenzy?
Well, Jim, China's certainly flexing its muscle with its military and its navy.
China's defense budget will rise by 6.8% this year.
Oh yeah, that's more like it.
Calling China a competitor and not an adversary raises questions as to whether or not Joe Biden is capable of addressing that threat.
Surely now it must be time to wake up General Miley and inform him of the shocking Chinese military threat. Or is it? For instance, you may not know that China's Navy has a major sea lift problem. What good is having millions of troops if you don't have the naval transports necessary to ferry them across the 100-mile-long water obstacle that separates China and Taiwan? The United States Department of Defense and Taiwan's Ministry of Defense both agree that China currently does not have the amphibious lift capacity needed for a major beach assault. If we take one of the most generous estimates of the lowest possible number of troops that the PLA would need to ferry across the water to invade and occupy Taiwan, Based on past wars, it would be 1 soldier to every 100 Taiwanese citizens. That means that China would need 250,000 troops on the low end for an invasion. Considering the fact that China right now has a total of 80 different landing vessels, it seems like a physical impossibility to transport that many forces. Only 3 of the landing ships are the advanced Type 75 transports, which can carry 9,000 Chinese soldiers, 10 amphibious vehicles. The rest are a mix of smaller vessels, including the Type 72, which can either carry 250 fully equipped infantry or 10 main battle tanks. Take your pick. By struggling to calculate some of the simple math using my average infantryman brain, even I can see that China can only sea lift approximately 50,000 troops and about 1,000 tanks at a time. The United States-China Economic Security Review Commission.
So in other words, China isn't actually planning to invade Taiwan, and their military is defensive. Who fucking knew? And by the way, the United States of America massively overspends on these kind of like high-level logistic capacity stuff, and serves as the world, it serves as the Western power's logistical hub. For example, we help Saudi Arabia with mid-air refueling when they're committing genocide in Yemen. We provide, for example, in Ukraine right now, satellite targeting and target approval when they use the weapons that we give them. Right? So we are providing that high-level logistics and intelligence capability, and nobody else spends on that shit because it's extremely expensive. It doesn't have much utility. China is not planning on invading across the goddamn world. I have 9,001 hours in CK3. I've taken over the world 10 times. I've reformed the Roman Emperor from the Kingdom of Aragon. You know nothing about strategy games. Australia is heavily lucrative in both CK3 and Risk. Also, China #1. It's not in CK3. You're a liar. All right, let's keep going.
Creates an annual report directly to
Dear
Congress
liar.
and the president. They're an authoritative source on estimating the threat of China. This group of 12 people have tremendous influence and sway over the U.S. defense policy towards China. Listen to what one of their commissioners, former U.S. Senator Talent, had to say.
They're increasing the pulse of their naval shipbuilding, and they're really trying to build up their amphibious capabilities. So we found that they have the amphib capability to land at least 25,000 troops.
Only 25,000? That's 6 times less than the amount that they used for D-Day. And they didn't even have to deal with cruise missiles then. Now what happened next in their meeting is kind of crazy. They opened the floor up to anyone, any constituent, citizen, or journalist who wanted to ask them a question.
I have just a question. Are we not going to war with this situation, are we? Because China is pretty powerful.
Maybe I will turn this question over to one of our security expertise.
I edited none of that. That actually happened. But it's a great question. Are we actually going to war with China? And are they really that powerful? If China had near-term nefarious intentions, you'd think that they'd be investing heavily in building new naval troop transports to fix this sea lift problem. However, according to the DoD, they've not made it a high priority to manufacture these types of landing ships.
Oh my god, is China not actually planning on invading Taiwan? And every dipshit liberal warmonger you see beating their chest are just trying to get gullible Americans to approve ever more infinite spending of our military industrial complex? Is China's military purely defensive, and understandably so, in an extremely hostile world? Who fucking knew? Who fucking knew? Yesterday, Hasan was saying the U.S. shouldn't go to Taiwan because it messes up the status quo. The entire ideology that Hasan and you support talks about getting rid of the status quo. It talks about achieving global communism, which involves getting rid of the status quo. So why do you oppose altering the status quo now? I don't think your first question makes more sense. You need to have more clarity. Are you asking me, do I want to have the United States of America fight China in a global World War III because it'll mess with the status quo, and I think status quo bad, therefore I must support anything that changes the status quo? Well, the human race going extinct is changing the status quo. I think that's pretty bad. I'm going to go ahead and say I'm against that. I'm not a Posadist. You fucking, you ape. China is actually investing in their naval power this year. Actually, look it up. Yes, they are increasing their naval capacity, but it's defensive.
Even though they clearly have the ability to do so. Over the past 5 years, the PLA has, according to the DoD, they've not made it a high priority to manufacture these types of landing ships, even though they clearly have the ability to do so. Over the past 5 years, the PLA has rarely conducted amphibious landings above the battalion level. These are facts that the media often conveniently ignores because no one clicks on that article, no one subscribes to that channel, except you, thank you. Don't worry though, if you're looking for doom and gloom, I've got your back. The way China is actually choosing to invest their naval defense money could be seen as much, much worse. Xi Jinping instead chose to create a long-range Type 003 aircraft carrier and Type 052D destroyer that would give them an advantage when it comes to attempting a blockade of the entire South China Sea. China would only need 62 battleships.
No, they are defending themselves, chat. Where? In the Strait of Malacca. The purpose of that would be to prevent a hostile foreign power from blockading their energy supply. They're not planning to invade other fucking countries. They're planning to keep naval fleets from being able to ring fence them in. It's actually completely opposite of what he's saying.
Ships plus fighter aircraft to block the US Navy in the region. A move that would avoid a costly war with the US and could still force reunification with Taiwan by basically holding them hostage, like the very kind of pirates that they claim to want to stop. But there's one problem with this theory. China might be getting creative. They started to convert their civilian ferries into troop transports. Yes, that might sound insane if you picture me riding on the Long Island ferry transporting an M1 Abrams tank, but China's civilian ferries are over twice that size and would actually be perfect for the role, according to an article written by Thomas Shugart for War on the Rocks, where he painstakingly went through the process of analyzing United States nation data and records of China's shipbuilding data to determine how much of a difference these civilian ships would really make. It turns out a whole lot. It would give China an extra 1.5 million tons of transportation ability. This would bring them to about the same capability as.
All right, my mods want me to show you that Breakfast 111 guy in Hasan. Once again, you are experiencing stuff. Your whole ideology is about getting rid of the status quo. You want global change and the status quo to get communism. Now the U.S. support Taiwan independence. You don't want to change the status quo? Have some shame. The U.S. doesn't support Taiwan's independence. The U.S. supports China's position on Taiwan, but they also play the Taiwanese by selling them weapons. That's it. Hasan's team don't rock the boat. Everybody who's saying his team don't rock the boat. Nobody wants to see a war and a conflict between China and any other country because we're not insane. Jesus Christ.
Is the U.S. military Sea Lift Command. So a successful amphibious assault of Taiwan.
No, communist supports independence for Chinese Taipei, obviously. Supporting independence for Chinese Taipei is absolutely insane and also wrong.
Cards. But how do we know what China's true intentions are? Is there any way I could peer into Xi Jinping's heart and know what he truly desires? For clues on their intentions, analysts look at how they spend their defense money and they work backwards from there. Figuring out China's true intentions are so important that each year Congress mandates the Department of Defense to create a fancy book report that explains to them what China's military is buying and what Xi Jinping is fantasizing about. If we zoom in on the bottom right of the front page, it says it cost $185,000 to create this report. It's created alongside the US Military Intelligence Network, and it's the most authoritative content on the subject. For that amount of tax money, it better tell us what Li Zhingzhu's, commander of the People's Liberation Army Ground Forces, favorite ice cream flavor is. So what exactly does the report tell us?
That was a very weird caption, but okay.
About China. To put China into context, it's only about 2% larger of a landmass compared to the United States, but its population is 4 times the size at 1.4 billion people. It's located in Southeast Asia with a coastline on the Pacific Ocean. They have contested and sometimes violent land border disputes with Nepal, Bhutan, and India, which means that they still have to worry about diverting military resources to internal defense. This would make freeing up units for global missions or invasions of nearby islands that are actually archipelagos very difficult. Why is China so geopolitically important? It's located next to the critical sea lane that accounts for 1/3 of the world's entire shipping. Over 50% of the world's population and 4 out of the 9 superpowers with nuclear weapons live within this circle here. So what all of that basically means is that I'm never getting my knockoff Gucci airsoft plate carrier if that route closes for business. This is the beautiful exotic South China Sea, where they have contested maritime border disputes with Vietnam, Japan, and the Philippines, to name a few. China's form of government is communism with a touch of authoritarianism sprinkled in there. Their president Xi Jinping has removed any term limits and now essentially is president for life. Since 1979, when China opened up to foreign trade and implemented free market reforms, they moved away from some of their communist policies, and since then, they've been the fastest growing major economy in history. While it's true that their defense spending has risen drastically, it might not be cause for major alarm because spending has remained stable at around 2% compared to their total economic output.
It means 2% of GDP. So China is increasing their military spending at the same rate that their regular economy is growing. So it's kind of just what the total value of it is increasing, but the cost of it isn't. The U.S. spends, I think, approximately 5 or 6% of our economy on defense. It might be 4%. Hold on, let me look. U.S. spending on defense percentage of GDP. The U.S. spends more on defense. It's 3.7% of GDP in 2020, and that's 38% of the total military spending worldwide. So the U.S. is spending significantly more both on the military from the point of view of percentage of GDP and absolutely. So they're more of a warmonger than China is. And also, term limits are bullshit. Who gives a fuck? If you repeal term limits according to the way term limits are, that doesn't mean anything. They're fucking stupid. Who gives a shit?
Recent modernization efforts have resulted in the new DF-041 intercontinental ballistic missile capable of firing 15,000 kilometers and hitting anywhere in the continental United States. The report indicates that China is likely several generations behind the US military. Part of the reason for this is the amount of rampant corruption in China's military. It's shocking. 90% of the duty crimes of soldiers are reported to involve embezzlement of financial gain in some way. It's similar to the problems we've seen in the Russian forces. In March 2014, former Chinese General Ji Zhuzhang was officially charged with embezzlement, bribery, and misuse of state funds. He had given $3 million as a bribe to another general's daughter as a wedding present in exchange for a promotion. This system of promotion through bribes extends down to the lowest ranks. If you're an average infantryman in the Chinese army, there's a good chance that your platoon leader or battalion commander is there because they paid for the job, not because they earned it. And this is going to cause all kinds of problems with discipline among the ranks. Xi Jinping uses corruption as a political weapon as a way to keep their generals loyal to the party. Since Xi took office, he had over 1.2 million officials investigated and 100 PLA general officers placed under investigation, of which the majority of them were his political rivals.
So wait a minute. You're saying corruption's a problem, but then President Xi investigates corruption, and you're like, aha! See? He's investigating his political rivals for the problem you said that was rampant. See, in America, it's not corruption, it's lobbying. All right? In China, it's corruption. In America, it's lobbying. And it's a contracting job.
RAND organization's paper on China's incomplete military transformation, they point out that the PLA has a zero external oversight or accountability whatsoever on how they spend their money, unlike NATO countries that are required to have some kind of civilian and congressional oversight.
The Pentagon has never been audited. There has never been a successful audit of the Pentagon.
2 out of the 5 of these senior corrupt officers.
Yes, I'm not saying this is good. Yeah, obviously, they need to work on corruption in the government. Obviously, if you know anything about Xi, you know that he is an anti-corruption zealot. He's constantly going after, exposing, or prosecuting people for corruption. But Mike, they're all just rivals. Okay, dude. Cosmos, thank you for the gifting us up. Appreciate you.
Oversaw logistics and supply, which calls into question just how effective China's logistics systems really are. Chinese prosecutors set up a mass text hotline where soldiers could give tips or rat out anyone committing corruption. They got $444 if it led to a conviction. Corruption investigations doubled within 2 weeks. Xi Jinping instituted a major reorganization in 2015 that saw the bloated army downsized by 300,000 soldiers, which took 5 years to successfully pull off. It also consolidated him as the head of the entire military organization They moved some of their forces around so that there's more focus on the Navy and Air Force and missile defense to rebalance their branches. Before 2015, they only had 12,000 Marines. That number has risen to 65,000 Chinese Marines since then and is set to reach over 100,000 by 2030. The problem is, China and all authoritarian forms of government tend to favor centralization of authority. This is a very inefficient and slow process in the military. The recent defense reforms by Xi Jinping are directed at making the PLA the armed wing of the CCP. They have mandatory unit political training sessions. I can only imagine how much fun that would be in the US military if we had to sit there and praise whoever the current president is and 5-hour-long briefing about how magnificent the party in charge is. The Chinese military actually...
So this is just the difference between, so in socialism, they believe in educating the masses, right? Like, you don't just consider your soldiers to be a worthless fucking grunt and you use force and bribes to get them to do things. You all, in China, they do the thing called educating. That's evil. In America, we don't do any political education. Anyway, George Washington never told a lie and cut down the cherry tree. If you accept profit as a valid organizing principle, then the whole window of things that could be called corruption is very narrow. Yeah, exactly.
Has Chinese Communist Party cadre attached to their military units.
Yes, so this is called a political officer, which is something that exists in socialist countries, is that you don't want a military to be a reactionary force of psychotic right-wingers. So you have political officers who check the politics because militaries are inherently right-wing and dangerous for any democratic organization. If you want to overturn democracy, you're going to use a military. So militaries in socialist countries spend time educating soldiers on leftist politics and having what are known as political officers, commissars, some other title, for ensuring political uniformity and within the military, to protect it from it being, say, infiltrated by the CIA and used against the people. The only reason we did have terminalists is because democratically elected socialists got so popular and did so much good for the people that oligarchs needed to get rid of it. I mean, I wouldn't call FDR a socialist, but he was a strong liberal Keynesian who allied with socialists and democratic socialists and social democrats. And many of those people, I'm not going to get distracted. Like the CIA would never infiltrate another nation's military, would they? And by the way, the U.S. has political officers. They don't call them that, but your acceptable range of political opinion is policed in America. If you're a communist, you can't serve in the military.
At every level to keep an eye on everything. The political charges. The Chinese military actually has Chinese Communist Party cadre attached to their military units at every level to keep an eye on everything. The political commissar is second in command and responsible for making many complex military decisions that have political consequences. Commissars help decide how to engage with a rival American vessel on the sea, even though they have very little military training. This could explain the odd
In fact, chat, there was a political commissaire on a Soviet submarine that was cut off, and they thought that the Soviet Union had been nuked. And so the military officers on the nuclear submarine wanted to launch their nuclear weapons and do a full retaliatory strike against the United States. And the political commissar who was on that ship overruled them, preventing Armageddon. This is something that happened in history.
Confrontational or seemingly irrational moves made by the Chinese warships that Western military officials originally thought was the behavior of rogue Chinese commanders. But this isn't reassuring. It means that the Chinese Communist Party is deliberately making the decision to have their destroyers sail dangerously close to American warships. Political commissars help ensure the troops...
Yeah, man, how come those Chinese warships are sailing dangerously close to American warships in the South China Sea? I mean, like, how did those Chinese warships get in the front of those Americans' ocean, which is named the South China Sea? Hey, it's only 8,000 fucking miles away from the U.S., but hey, how did they get there?
Loyalty to the party, but at the cost of slowing down decision-making and confusing command and control. It's an antiquated form of command left over from the Soviet Union that the Chinese learned from the Soviets and have kept on holding on to ever since, even though the Russian army has long since abolished this system. In China,
wait, which system is that?
Ships. Political commissars help ensure the troops' loyalty to the party, but at the cost of slowing down decision-making and confusing command and control. It's an antiquated form of command left over from the Soviet Union that the Chinese learned from the Soviets and have kept on holding on to ever since, even though the Russian army has long since abolished this system. In China, this is not seen as a problem holding their forces back, but as a benefit. The reason for this is because of a Chinese officer named Sun Linjin. He's the only military officer who was educated in the United States, and he was a Chinese military hero who opposed this system and suggested, hey, maybe we shouldn't have party officials looking down our shoulder. He was then arrested and charged with conspiracy. These are the kind of fun games that you get up to when you have no real war going on. In fact, China has no pew-pew experience. China's military hasn't seen a major combat operation since 1979 when they invaded Vietnam. And according to Western estimates, they suffered over 26,000 KIA in that time. Does the average infantryman in China have the grit, the chutzpah, the vigor to actually fight? This has nothing to do with them not being combat tested. There are plenty of examples in the history of newbie armies winning. The Chinese military relies on 800,000 conscripts who serve for a period of 2 years, not the kind of troops who can necessarily fight and win wars as Xi Jinping's stated goal. Open source US military reports indicate that the discipline in the PLA is terrible. The leaders of each branch fight to protect their own vested interests, which are colloquially known as iron rice bowls. Am I allowed to say?
This is literally what the United States does. We call it service rivalry in the United States. It's so funny to listen to people describe things that happen in the United States, which we call, all the things are like, wow, this is really bad. They have corruption. Anyway, did you hear that 4-star general is now on the board of Lockheed Martin? It's like, bro.
Say that. It's a term that means they have guaranteed job security, even if they're incompetent. This, coupled with corruption, destroys discipline in the ranks. The United States has a first island chain policy to try to contain China's influence. Last year, they approved $27 billion of spending to create missile systems all along this chain. China, on the other hand, has invested heavily in anti-access area denial, or A2AD.
Hey, chat, that's so odd. I mean, like, the U.S. is building weapons all along island chains pointing at China. This doesn't seem very much like it's, this seems pretty hostile to me. I don't know. Seems kind of warmongery to me.
Access area denial, or A2AD technology.
So what you'll see is China's investments in the military are based on doctrines that are highly cost effective, right? Like, you're not going to invade the United States with these missiles, but you might put a carrier fleet at the bottom of the ocean for a bargain basement price.
They've purchased Russian S-400 anti-air missile systems. All of this is designed to create a protective defensive bubble to stop any military from getting close to their coast. This bubble has slowly been getting bigger and bigger, where it now includes Guam, where US troops are located. But the problem is a lot of these missile systems that China has aren't necessarily able to hit a moving target yet because they don't have the necessary tracking information to hit a US naval vessel moving at 30 knots. By China's own internal estimations, they won't be on par with the United States until 2041. Keep in mind, China has a policy of downplaying their capabilities at every turn, unlike Russia. It's part of their strategy to make us think that their military is worse than it actually is. For all of their strengths, I believe there is twice as many weaknesses that still need to be sorted out. These shortcomings are often less reported, partly because being shocking and alarmist sells better whether you're a politician or a random veteran on YouTube. Watch, tomorrow China will successfully invade and take over the world. I'll be forced to host a YouTube channel promoting the CCP, and it will prove that there really was a good reason to be alarmist. But in the meantime, until that happens, the lack of military transportation, logistics, the rampant corruption, and the poor organization and doctrine of Chinese forces will continue to hold them back if their intentions are world domination. This is not to say that the Chinese military isn't a potential threat to Taiwan. It's me exploring one possible scenario and attempting to use evidence to support that argument. If you agree or you think I missed something in my research, please let me know. If you like this geopolitical rundown, then check this video out when you get a chance. I think you'll really like it. It's part of the same series. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. You're watching Task and Purpose.
So basically, the conclusion of that is that there is very little threat of China of aggressive war. And the United States is, in fact, the warmonger who overspends on its military and who is constantly threatening and trying to menace China. Exactly what you would expect. Are you watching the stream unsubbed? You're making income inequality worse. You are doing anti-praxis. We are the only Twitch stream that will not accept scam advertisers, and I will never fuck you over by selling you crap.